don't know where this is all coming from. Every good thing that ever happened to you happened because of network executives like me. That show you spend all day watching, your house, your career.
Great house, great career, great life. That must be why I'm so goddamn happy all the time. You don't even know.
Oh, I don't know.
My life was ruined by a network executive like you.
That doesn't give you the right to be shitty to me. I can't be around someone who's just fueled by bitterness and negativity.
Well then, what are you doing here?
What happened, Bojack?
Same thing that always happens. You didn't know me. Then you fell in love with me. And now you know me.
You know, it's funny. When you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags.
So here's the thing about Wanda's goodbye in Bojack Horseman. It's a well-known quote from the series, and one that many would cite as their favorite lesson that they ever received from the show as a whole. But I wanted to dive a bit deeper into what exactly these rose-colored glasses mean for us all, and how it may have intersected with your life more than you previously considered. And just a little note at the top, none of this is a criticism of Wanda or Bojack for getting into this relationship in the first place. I fully believe Bojack wanted to make it work, and I don't think Wanda's a fool for taking him at his word. Sometimes relationships just don't work because of where you are as people when you're together, and there's not really someone you should be blaming for the pairing not working out just because maybe these two weren't at the point in their lives where they were ready for that type of commitment. Mostly Bojack. But one of the main things we can take away from this breakup is how some of us look for companionship rather than love. Perhaps the most central aspect of this idea is how the perception of something is much better than the actual reality. Wanda believed Bojack was a much different man than he actually was, that he was the man he promised he would be to her. And, as she states, she perhaps looked past those red flags that jumped out at her throughout their time together. After all, she is living with him pretty immediately, so she sees his toxic behavior and unhealthy tendencies up close and personal. Not to mention that this jump to live together is the result of them feeling that life is short. And while, yes, that is true and it is important to appreciate the time you have, leaping into a relationship and becoming serious this quickly with someone that you barely know can be a recipe for disaster, especially when they're really the first prospect since you've come out of a 30-year coma. Something I think contributes to this idea and this rather rash decision is the perception thrown throughout American society across the decades that there is almost a finish line for those looking for love. And at a certain age, it is too late for someone to be able to find someone else to genuinely connect with or love. And this is even more prevalent as an expectation for women. The insanely high price that is placed on a woman's age, almost stating that she decreases in value with each birthday, puts an insane amount of unnecessary pressure on all women as they age to find someone, lest they end up alone, which is also portrayed as a nightmare for a woman to be. When in reality, you don't need a relationship to lead a happy life. I mean, you've got people praising men for never settling down and being eternal bachelors, even though oftentimes that meant that they were gay as hell. But then you have this concept of the spinster, which is a really dated term at this point to describe unmarried women over 35, and is kind of this caricature of a woman who has seemingly given up on being the traditional wife and mother that was often expected at many different times throughout history, and would consider you a success as a woman in general. And while we've moved far forward in the expectations of modern women, there is still a large problem with the perception of a woman's age that is just not matched with men. And there's also a scarily growing number of men that want to turn back to those traditional gendered views of a woman's role in the world and force women back into these positions that in many cases didn't work out for them. In the book Spinster, Making a Life of One's Own, there's a lot of fantastic insight about the perceptions of women who are not with someone or married at any point in their life, and how they can often be perceived as an anomaly in terms of typical societal norms. According to Doris Lessing, quoted in the book, very few people are happy indeed as solitaries, as they tend to be seen by their neighbors as peculiar or selfish or worse. Most people cannot stand being alone for long. They are always seeking group groups to belong to. We are group animals still, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what is dangerous is not the belonging to a group or groups, but not understanding the social laws that govern groups and govern us. This is extremely astute. This video is not suggesting that Wanda should be on her own the rest of her life, or that everyone should resolve to a life of solitude and needs to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They can't lean on anyone else. No, we all need people to rely on, talk to, confide in. But the mistake is thinking we need that person to be a husband or boyfriend, and forcing ourselves inside of a role just because we think it's what's expected of us and what might cause the most success by society standards. You don't need to jump into something just because you're scared that it'll never happen. Some people don't find the love of their life. Sometimes it doesn't happen, and that is just the reality. Does that mean those people don't live as full or meaningful lives? Not at all. In some cases, I'm sure they lead more meaningful lives. There is companionship to be had all around you, and partners who can lift you up, encourage you, and comfort you, all in a non-romantic sense. I mean, many people are aromantic, meaning they don't largely feel these romantic emotions towards others at all. But realizing that allows them to find their own happiness and the connections that they need to sustain themselves and their emotional state beyond romance, which is such a beautiful concept that a lot of people don't really consider. The book even details how the law even defines women by these principles, stating that a single woman includes one who may have lost her husband or perhaps judicially separated from one, not even considering the fact that someone could just be single by choice. They define them by what they don't have. And even if you are part of a couple or some sort of romantic relationship that doesn't fit with society's guidelines, you're often considered to be what's called socially single anyhow, and receive the same treatment about, oh, why aren't you looking for someone to settle down with? One thing that is so tragic about Wanda was that she never really broke up with Bojack. He was more the one to break things off, and even later that episode, Wanda is seen going to the door, hoping Bojack will show up in that cliche romantic fashion to take her back, even after she stated this line about missing his red flags. It is so easy to understand, as she's still fresh from the wounds of this breakup, visibly, but it is absolutely heartbreaking to see her still yearn for Bojack to come back to her, even though he's proven to her time and time again that he isn't right for her. It is an instinct. That fear of being alone is so strong in her, I feel, that she would even accept Bojack if he made a big grand gesture there, despite the fact that we know the grand gesture is not nearly enough. Again, this is mostly from the fear that it might be too late. It's so justified, given the sheer amount of time, too, that she lost in that coma. She is worried about being able to live her life to the fullest, not really realizing that a man, or specifically Bojack, is not the way she has to do it. It could be. She could absolutely find the love of her life, or a man that lifts her up and can be her closest confidant. That is certainly possible. But forcing yourself into those relationships and jumping quickly with someone you don't really know is not the way to find those connections. She also, right before their breakup, instead of calling out his behavior and how terribly he's been treating her, resolves to take him on a trip to Santa Barbara to sort of reset the state of them as a couple. She's not looking to actually leave him just yet, and is trying everything she can to bring them back together because of that strong sense of fear. It's good to see that she has a sister who is seemingly there for her. Despite never seeing Wanda again, I do have a strong feeling that she will be okay in the long run, regardless of her love life, because she clearly has a support system. But it is absolutely tragic to watch her try so hard to keep this relationship for fear of simply not having a relationship. And it's so understandable too. Even when Bojack started to doubt their relationship, which did not take long, by the way. I mean, he almost started freaking out about it immediately after asking her to move in. But in After the Party, he provided some genuine reasons for why he's afraid to move forward, or stating, quite correctly, that they jumped into something without thinking particularly rationally about it. But Wanda asserts that they need to take more time, and that things may improve and become even stronger in their relationship if they stick with it. I do like this message, and this side story is so adorable, but I think it is very telling how this does not end up working out despite this lesson. And the more time they spend with each other, the more they realize that they indeed did not know enough about one another to make this huge commitment, eventually leading to the breakup. She tries really hard to make things work, not really looking at the truth that Bojack is just not ready to be in a relationship with anyone right now, because she believes that she needs to be in a relationship to be happy, and that she is running out of time for that to happen for her. So she is going to try as hard as she can to make Bojack work. But later, Wanda, who is a very communicative person, does not receive the affirmations that are necessary for her to feel comfortable from Bojack. He's very hands-off and tries to keep her at arm's length at multiple points throughout season 2. Like when he mistakenly says, "I love you," and then immediately takes it back in higher love. And even though this episode has a bit of a cute resolution, he still refuses to admit that he loves her and tries to cover up his feelings with his words. Bojack is first drawn to her because Wanda makes him want to be a better person, as he stated in Yesterdayland. But over the course of season 2, he doesn't really put all that much effort into changing, and since Wanda was supposed to be the one who could change him, he begins to distance himself from her, revealing more and more of his negative tendencies, rather than the wonderful man that Wanda actually met. Except now, she's deep into this relationship and genuinely cares for him, and wants it to work even more. Which leads us to the next extremely relatable part of this breakup, which is thinking you will be able to fix someone. So we've discussed that Wanda perhaps looked past some of Bojack's obvious flaws, but not how she does so. Those little justifications that your brain may conjure up to avoid facing that harsh reality. He didn't mean it. He's trying his best. He's had a hard day. He'll get better. Little excuses that will allow you to continue your day without confrontation, because frankly, it is really scary sometimes to be able to actually confront something about what is bothering you. Their relationship starts out with a promise from Bojack to be better, including a statement that she is the one who spurned this change in him, which already inherently puts Wanda up on a pedestal of the woman who will finally be able to change or fix him, as if he wasn't able to do it on his own. He fundamentally can't and is terrible by himself. I love the sentiment with Bojack wanting to be better for her and proving it, but that truly isn't why you should be improving. It should be for yourself and your own emotional health, and if you've spent all this time repeating the same cycles, thinking that one person is going to change everything about you, you are dooming yourself to failure. I've already stated how this can lead to disaster and forced expectations in the person you are placing on this pedestal. In fact, this whole idea comes from codependency. In an article I've linked below, codependency is excellently contextualized as the opposite of true love, as it's based on feelings of fear, like the fear of not being enough, like Bojack's case here. He latched on to Wanda as someone he thought would be able to save him, as he gets worse and worse and spirals further downward, and puts her in this position to feel responsible for him, and to have a strong need to succeed in his change. Codependency comes from these extremely inflated fears and insecurities, as Bojack, we know, himself has. We've stated many times before how he sees himself as a bad man, and someone who is innately terrible. So he latches onto Wanda as someone who can pull him out of it, as he is fundamentally unable to do it himself. And she, of course, is not the only person he latches onto. Over the course of the series, you could also include Diane in this list. Oh, no, actually, I was gonna say not in a romantic sense, but definitely in Bojack's case, in a romantic sense. It's a pattern of his. He mistakes those feelings of fear for love, and subsequently that also causes him to idolize these people like Wanda, seeing traits in her that might not necessarily be there, and expecting things she might not necessarily be capable of. Bojack needs Wanda to make himself feel whole, because that attention helps distract himself from his own shortcomings. But he isn't actually making any sort of progress, and he, at the end of the day, still feels that he is unworthy of love and that he is fundamentally awful, mostly due to the trauma he faced as a child. It repeatedly manifests in his relationships where he tries to find affection despite feeling as if he doesn't deserve affection. I mean, how could he think so after his parents spent years and years of his life telling him that he directly was not worth anything and that he ruins everything he touches? Not to mention that they themselves struggled with mental health issues and low self-esteem and would only pass those on to him biologically, as well as through their own behavior while raising him. From Bojack's point of view, it's only a matter of time before Wanda leaves him and finds out who he really is. As we see, in their final argument. It's as if Bojack this whole time was just waiting for an excuse to slip up and push Wanda further away, stating that she could never love him because now she truly knows him. This whole relationship, Bojack was living in total fear that Wanda might one day discover who he truly is and then leave him, because that's what everyone does from his perspective, right? He pushes them all away, it's inevitable, and there's nothing he can do about it. He just has to wait for it to happen to Wanda. And as is later told by the closer in Stop the Presses, he does this so he can point to whatever terrible thing he did as the reason for her leaving, not actually because of him. Thus, the cycle continues about knowing he's terrible and wanting to change it, but not making the effort to change it, and then using that as an excuse. To himself, the true Bojack is self-indulgent, narcissistic, and utterly incapable of spreading any sort of good, and it was just a matter of time before Wanda found that out. And Wanda herself, well, I can't speak to her codependency because we don't get a lot of backstory for her, but I will say that it is common for people who are codependent to seek out partners who are similar to them and have traits that they can lean on and latch onto. Plus, this fixing mentality also often stems from those who have a strong need to please others, whether that be to improve their own self-esteem and feel useful, or to exert control over their daily lives, which they don't really have any. Especially in those whose own lives haven't been easily controlled thus far. Like, say, I don't know, you lost 30 years of it in a coma. So, in an effort to reclaim it, to feel in control, and as if you have some autonomy in this extremely chaotic life that the universe has thrown at you, you jump into a relationship, convincing yourself it will be better than it actually will be, and telling yourself that if it isn't good, you'll make it better anyway. This is kind of where toxic optimism comes in, where it's good to be optimistic and give people the benefit of the doubt to a point, but at some point you have to admit that you can't control everyone and everything in your life, and you'll be much happier if you accept that fact. Wanda herself knows before moving in with Bojack that he has a lot to work on, but she works past it because of the speech he gives to her in Yesterdayland. She sees his potential and wants to believe that he can be better. People who are compassionate like this, who want others to feel happy, are often able to look past overt flaws, staring straight at what they hope the person could be instead of what actually is. It's completely understandable why someone would jump at the chance to be with someone who does show signs of changing, or at least wanting to change. That alone can be enough to get us to look past a whole lot of negative behavior. It changes our entire perception of a person, but that doesn't make their progress your responsibility. To the point where a bunch of the fans of Bojack, well, I think it's just a really loud minority, to be honest, but a bunch of people forgive Bojack for his actions and say that he definitely didn't do anything wrong because he wants to be better, that he's just misunderstood, that those who left him are bad people, like Hollyhock. I mean, that alone can prove how simply stating that you want to change, or even showing that you want to change a little bit without putting too much effort in, can shift someone's perception on you, and can provide for a lot of excuses in their own mind. Going back to that, oh, he'll be better, he's trying. Or, in the worst and most extreme cases of fixing people, saying, I need to be better and do more to change his personality. And it's why she moves to try and fix things every time there's an issue, rather than address the core problem that Bojack actually needs to work on. Like when she suggests the trip to Santa Barbara right before they break up. Bojack is sinking deeper and deeper into this depressive, wallowing, self-hating state with Diane, cursing everything about his life and spreading only negativity in the house. But Wanda simply tries to steer him in the other direction, rather than recognize that this is a pattern of Bojack's and it is destined to repeat again, possibly catching her up in the destruction if Bojack chooses not to work on it as he has been thus far. There are lots of times where Wanda works very hard to work around Bojack's flaws rather than admit that Bojack has a central issue that he himself is not admitting, and that he might never be able to. Also along this vein, we do get a bit of an idea about Wanda's perfectionism throughout her working life and intensity toward Mr. Peanut Butter. During Hollywood Stars and Celebrities, What Do They Know? Do They Know Things? Let's Find Out. And that trait can be a major contributor to these types of relationships. Admitting failure is difficult for anyone, but especially for those who are career-driven, perfectionists. And it seems that Wanda is really talented and dedicated to her work. She's always getting promoted by other companies. It also shows that she has a small amount of control issues, as she cannot let Mr. Peanut Butter continue forward with his actual emotions in an effort for her show to succeed. I think it could have equally worked for ratings if he didn't forgive Bojack, but Wanda is able to force the reconciliation through, not accepting any possibility of failure and subsequently steamrolling Mr. Peanut Butter's emotions in the process, which she also does later after putting pressure on Bojack to get Diane to stop speaking up about Hank After Dark, not really understanding where Diane is coming from. This could absolutely translate into our personal life as well, as perfectionism is not just a relationship with one's professional career, but it manifests in all ways of life, especially in those you live extremely close to. If she needs that control and someone near her is acting chaotically, she will try to rein them in. She's also, as stated by Diane, a stunted 20-year-old, as she hasn't been around or conscious for 30 years, and thus hasn't particularly developed linearly as all humans are kind of meant to. She doesn't have that much life experience, especially with adult relationships and how to be an effective partner, and to recognize those same traits in others. Like I said before, Bojack is largely one of the first prospects she's exposed to after her coma, and she largely jumps headfirst into it. No blame here, by the way. Again, all of this is totally understandable behavior, but she is a bit naive and eager, like many 20-year-olds are. And I think this is an excellent depiction of that youthful mentality and kind of relationship ambition that can lead to disaster by convincing yourself that someone is perfect for you when they're really not, or that you could make someone perfect for you. Oh, I don't like this about them, and this really bothers me, and they're not working on that, but I bet if they spend enough time with me, I could get them to get on that habit, which isn't really good for you or the person you're trying to force into a different lifestyle. Just gonna lead to disaster, as I've been saying. And the last aspect of this rose-colored glasses analogy is the idea of giving someone too many chances. It's tough to toe the line between being forgiving and empathetic and not enabling negative behavior by consistently letting them off the hook. Sometimes there isn't a justification in your head, and you are fully aware that what you just witnessed was indeed a red flag and that you do not like that behavior. We, as the audience in Bojack, had to walk this same line as well, even while viewing all of the terrible things he did. So did Diane. At what point do I just have to stop believing I'll be able to forgive Bojack one day? At what point do I stop getting my hopes up for him to do the right thing and admit to myself that I will not be able to control him? That no matter how many chances I give him, it may not work. Given all the context on his childhood, every depiction of how positively he can act, and how much hope and promise is still there for him to get better, like in season 4, when do we draw that line? It's a really difficult judgment to make, as being inside a relationship hampers your objective perception of it, which is why it's important to have friends and people who care besides your significant other. So it's harder to see the absolute severity of the situation as you're immersed in it. That's another crucially important aspect of this quote from Wanda, and a slightly different interpretation. Inside relationships, you look at things completely differently than how you would perceive somebody else's. It's fundamental and honestly something that cannot be helped. First-person perspective will skew your memory of a situation, and it's important to keep this in mind and freshen your own perspective with others that you care about to make sure you receive a different, perhaps more rational point of view. And before their breakup, there are several mistakes that Bojack makes, but Wanda is often willing to let them slide without seeing any actual radical change from Bojack, or effort to change from Bojack. Whether that be through stalking Alex and not trusting her, the I love you, no I don't fiasco, him not asking her whether or not he could run a kooky scheme with all his friends in their house, or allowing Diane to make herself at home and then joining in her depressive episode. There are a lot of instances of disagreements in the short time they're together, and honestly, Wanda doesn't even really have all that much screen time. So it's interesting to see how they work through these issues, especially with the whole I love you, no I don't thing. Again, the ending of this episode is cute, but Wanda never really admits to Bojack or herself that he is actively trying to push her away and won't allow her to get close to him or admit his own feelings. She accepts his gesture of him not autoerotic asphyxiating himself as his admission, but again, there's not much work being done here because Bojack still vocally denies it. And again, we never come back to this process either. This is the last time it's addressed. Overall, this plotline does a really good job depicting how you can be reassured about an issue in your relationship and resolve to move past it, despite the fact that it was never really resolved in the first place. Wanda simply sees the modicum amount of progress that Bojack has made and accepts it for what it is. Again, while this practice of accepting reality and not always leveling high expectations on everyone is important and not bad in itself, it is valid to also recognize when someone is fundamentally falling short repeatedly, such as Bojack's response to Wanda's presence and the care she's given him throughout their months of dating. Overall, I'm very glad that Wanda and Bojack never got back together. They also state that Wanda is professionally doing very well for herself, so she was able to draw that line, distance herself from Bojack, and realize what she needed to be happy, which I'm extremely thankful for. But it is so difficult to watch her struggle to recognize exactly who Bojack is while she's dating him, and to hope, both for Bojack's sake and hers, that he will be able to do better this time around, and then watching him ultimately fail. It's a really heartbreaking story, and one of the most excellently depicted relationships in this entire show, evidenced by the fact that people are still talking about this quote. I mean, nobody has ever forgotten it. It is so crucial to the overall theme of this show, and realizing your own happiness and making important decisions for your own emotional health. Again, like Hollyhock did, Wanda does not owe Bojack anything to stay in this relationship, as much as she might feel she wants to or needs to fulfill some sort of societal pressure. At the end of the day, Wanda finds what she needs to be happy without him, and that is the best ending of all. But if you enjoyed this video, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/PosiTVty to get extra content in the form of unedited essays and all of these videos before they come out on here. But also the support on YouTube means a whole lot. So thank you for subscribing, commenting, liking. We love talking to you guys in the comments below. Discuss this show further and let me know what you would like to see for the next video. I always appreciate your input. And bye. I'm getting better at these, huh?